Thank you very much, Mr. Knopper. If the deputy mayor wants to hit the gavel, we can begin, but I want to call to order the regular council, the WC O'Neill Arena Complex Council Chambers. This meeting is also being streamed through Zoom and on Facebook. If anyone that is joining us online through Facebook has any questions, they can email them to pnopper@townofstandrews.ca. For recording of attendance, I do see myself, but all members of council are in attendance. Is that correct, Mr. Knopper?
All members of council are in attendance, excluding Councillor Heenan.
Thank you very much. And before we begin the meeting, I just wanted to recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Beskoto-Magadi people. We'll be looking for a mover to approve the agenda. Could I have one, please? And just turn your mic on.
You've got Councillor
Harlan.
Seconder. Councillor Hurdle.
Councillor Hurdle, perfect. I'll be relying on you a lot, Mr. Knopper, just because it looks like there's a little bit of a delay from my end. So we'll work through it together. Is there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Your Worship, just one. We do have to go into closed session under Local Governance Act 68(1)J. It deals with labor relations and negotiations.
Perfect. I do know there's a placeholder in the agenda for closed session, so I don't think we need an amendment on that. It's just good to disclose why. So if there's no other changes, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving this agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And that is everybody. The agenda has been approved. We'll get into the disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there any this evening?
Your Worship, I have two.
Acadgy.
I have two. Dial-A-Ride, because I'm a driver for them, and the one right after it with the grant for the First Nations drum making workshop, because I'm organizing that as well. So I will recluse myself. Thank you.
So that's under community assistance grants. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Acadgy. Is there anyone else?
No, Your Worship.
Seeing none, myself, I will be declaring one under community assistant grants as well. Mine will be regarding the Vincent Massey Elementary School Home and School Association, as my wife is the president and submitted the application, and I want to keep things good at home as well. So if there's no other, we'll move into presentations, which there's none this evening. We already approved the minutes at the previous meeting. There's nothing under communications or staff reports, so we'll get into I guess you could say the bulk of today's meeting, which is the introduction, consideration, and passing of bylaws and motions. And the first motion goes to Deputy Mayor Acadgy under Finance and Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. And the reference number is FA 230206. And it's with, the background is this. With local governance reform, the Regional Service Commission have been given the mandate by the province to expand the services they are providing to the region. As such, the RSC is creating a new committee structure to review files on the following committee portfolios: recreation, tourism, public safety, economic development, transportation, community development, landfill, Planning Regional Advisory Committee, the Planning Advisory Committee in St. Andrews. With the new RSC committees, Council needs to appoint councillors to each portfolio to provide input on St. Andrews issues, participate in regional discussions and collaborations, and report back to Council. Appointments are for the term of the Council. So the motion is this: that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews appoint the following councillors to the Regional Service Commission committees for the term of the Council. 1, Recreation, Councillor Kurt Gumashal. 2, Transportation, Councillor Mark Bennett. 3, Tourism, Councillor Jamie Hurdle. 4, Community Development, Councillor Lee Heenan. 5, Public Safety, Councillor Steve Neal. 6, PRAC, the Planning Advisory Committee in St. Andrews as well, Councillor Annette Harland. 7, Landfill, Councillor Mark Blanchard. 8, Economic Development, Councilor Darrell Weir. And 9 is the alternate, the Deputy Mayor Kate Akagi. And I so move this, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Akagi. Just one quick note before I look for a seconder. Under number 6, that should read PAC, correct? Not PRAC?
That is correct, Your Worship. It is
Okay.
the Planning Advisory Committee for
That's what
St.
I thought,
Andrews.
but-
It's just a
We'll
replacement for.
Call that a friendly amendment, just for clarity for the minutes.
It was just a typo, I think.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion?
You got Councilor
I got
Bennett.
Councilor Bennett.
Councilor Bennett,
Steve. So, is there any discussion on this particular motion? I do want to add, just for everyone's to be aware that this does not mean you're officially on these committees, because the board at the Regional Service Commission would also have to accept your membership to the committee, but the objective would be that the names brought forward by all the mayors are the ones accepted. So just for a technicality, just so you're aware. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's everybody, so congratulations on your new portfolios. So I believe that's it for Deputy Mayor this evening. And Councillor Blanchard under Public Works doesn't have any motions, but there is a discussion on the Market Wharf weight restriction, which is PW 230209. I'll pass it over to, I believe, Mr. Spirit this time to take council through the staff report.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's, if I may, I might do a condensed version of the staff report, just to give a little bit of a history and kind of where we are now without going into the technicalities of the ensuing report. So, as council knows, the town acquired the wharf in about 1996, 1997. And over the years, it's been going through various levels of deterioration. So to give you an idea of the money we've spent, in 2014-15, we spent $112,000 on necessary repairs. 15-16, $400,000 on repairs. Then 2017, another $45,000 in repairs. These weren't refurbishments. These were just repairs to the main structure to maintain it for a few years down the road. But as you're aware, we've recently had, in 2018, we made application to RDC to have some work done on the wharf, which included the approach and some work on the piles in Market Square. So because at that point the application was for infill, kind of the rock style, and that was what we initially thought, but once they went back to council and after we'd made the application already, the community didn't think that was appropriate from a heritage standpoint, so council looked at alternative ways to do it, and so it was been delayed for a couple of years. And so, as discussed last fall, the cost of the project's running between $7 to $8 million now over the original budget of $5 million. And so we approached RDC a few weeks ago about additional funding, and we thought it would be a hard no, but they actually said, well, maybe. So we put together a plan for them on how it's to fund it over the years and put it in. They asked some questions up until the end of last week, so that application is still in the process of being considered, which will go a long ways to figuring out what next steps are. But in the meantime, as we let users know, and you as well, that we had an engineering report just to see the current condition of the wharf, and there's some concerns around what we call bent 25, which is essentially the wooden frames that hold the deck of the wharf. And because of the deterioration there, they're recommending only medium-duty trucks go there, which is about 19 to 26,000 pounds or up to 12,000 kilograms, which is essentially a Ford F-650 and below. What the challenge is for us is we've kept restrictions on boom trucks and things to a certain extent, but the big problem is the fuel trucks aren't able to get down now. And so one of our main customers from the biological station has the big Viola Davidson there, and they require a fuel truck just by the size of it, but even the fishermen tend to get fuel trucks going down there. And so we have to determine, we've had to put the restrictions up and let them know. There's possibly other alternatives for fuel delivery, including going to other wharfs, which isn't their preference, but it could be done. But the question is what next steps councils want to do. I put the question back to our engineers to determine how much the cost is going to be, and to date, they haven't gotten back to me. They're looking at it. They did the calculation, but didn't reach out the other way to figure out the cost of replacing. I'm going to tell you from my experience, it's probably going to be minimum 50 and much as 75 or 80,000, just based on some of the previous work we've done for similar issues. But it could be a lot higher, a lot lower, but that's just kind of the neighborhood. But it is an area that we wanted to have replaced. And so it's a question of, do we repair it, knowing that in 6 months to 8 months to a year and a half, we might tear that up and put in a whole new structure there. And so we're caught between a rock and a hard place, that we get an over budget project that we don't necessarily want to create more funding or more costs by doing a repair that's going to be torn out. But at the same time, it is going to put some restrictions on our users over the summer during their busiest time.
And just so council is aware that the engineer's report on the bent 25 and the repairs was provided to RDC as part of the discussion process for the new wharf. So all information has been provided to the province within that process.
And they certainly see the importance of it, sorry, Your Worship, and they were glad to get that engineering report, as the clerk had mentioned, in order to give it a higher priority. But we won't know till they let us know, and hopefully in the next week, definitely by the next meeting, we should have answers from both the engineers and RDC what their funding and the costs are going to be. But regardless, we still have to figure out if we want to repair it eventually. And we're not looking for answers tonight until we provide you more information, but the users have concerns and are going to continue to have concerns until we get this addressed. But we just wanted to bring yourselves and everyone else up to date. I didn't want to go into, as I said, CPCL provided an 8 or 10 page report there that showed some of the various problems we're having. Most of it is stuff that you wouldn't see, except for what happens is you have these wooden structures that have wood on top that are supporting the deck, and a lot of them are softening, and tends to be the main problem. And there's other smaller stuff that's good for the overall repair of the wharf is really needed. But again, it's a question of, are we going to repair what's there or replace and have something for decades in the future?
Thank you very much, Mr. Spear. I appreciate that, and Mr. Knopper for providing some more insight. So right now, it doesn't really appear that there is a decision before council because we're still waiting on the costing for the repairs. And as well, we're looking for confirmation with our partners for funding as well. Would that be safe to assume that this is just an information and we'll debate it heavier at the next meeting?
That's correct, Your Worship, but it's also, I guess it's going to be something that's going to require more than 5 minutes thought. So I think it'll give council a time to talk to their constituents and to mull over it themselves or come to the office and ask questions so they can make a better informed decision instead of trying to figure it out in one evening. It gives them, a couple of weeks to really think about it and try to come up with a reasonable plan.
Understood. Is there any questions from any member of council?
Councillor Neal's got a question.
Okay, go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to, inform everybody else, again, with regards to the weight restriction, along with the fuel trucks, it also actually excludes all of our current fire trucks. So we don't currently have a fire truck that would be able to drive down the wharf at this point. And I guess my main concern with that, again, is, and I don't know the answer to this question, but would be around sort of possible liability issues with regards to some of the smaller vessels still fueling when we can't adequately provide fire coverage. If I'm not mistaken, the length of the wharf is about 800 feet.
Yeah, about 300 meters.
Okay, so I think currently the longest stretch pre-connected on one of our fire trucks is probably about 200, 250 feet. So we could stretch hose the length of the wharf, but it would be an increased amount of time. There would be a substantial effort there, bringing rolls of hose down in a half-ton truck, unrolling them, connecting them. And, I guess apart from the liability issue, the concern would be the lack of quick response, really. And the fact that, again, if there was an accident to happen, the concern would not only be to the, sort of the immediate vessel that might be experiencing a fire, but also to the vessels around it, let alone the wharf itself. So I guess that was my major concern. I do have again, I guess it would depend on how we decide we're going to proceed, whether we're going to fix it or wait and hopefully replace it. But I think it's something to consider when we get into that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very, very good point, Councillor Neal. I know we've talked about it before, and I'm not sure about from an insurance perspective if there's a concern there as well, but I think that's going to weigh in on the decision-making process. So you're under the impression you'll probably get the expected cost of these repairs within the next week?
That's the hope, Your Worship. And Councillor Neal does bring up a good point. As you know, Councillor Weir has had experience at wharves, and he had mentioned that they had a similar issue. And so what we might be able to do, and I'll ask the engineers if it's possible, is to make a dedicated line that goes down the wharf, that we might be able to, like you see in some buildings where they just have to throw the hoses in the back of the half tide and get down to the end of the wharf and then attach it to an outlet there that would have sufficient pressure to treat any issues out there.
Sounds good. We kind of know this day is coming. We've been talking about the wharf for a while, but it seems like the exact reason why we need these repairs is starting to force our hand a little bit. So, Council, I expect this to be in our next meeting package. Again, today there's not enough information to make a decision on the best course for the community. I'll open it up again just in case there's any other questions, since I don't have normal visibility or comments. Okay.
No
Not
further
seeing
comments.
anyone, Mr. Nopper?
No further comments, Your Worship.
Okay, we're going to come back to this at the next meeting, and I appreciate the staff update on that one. The next one is not a motion as well. It is more of a discussion. It's under public safety. The discussion on draft bylaw number 23-02, a bylaw to regulate vehicular traffic at the town of St. Andrews, PS 230207. Is this one you, Mr. Nopper?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. So, Council, what you have before you, I have provided a staff report that gives you an outline of what we're looking at in regards to the new motor vehicle bylaw. This has been in the works for a while. We've received over the last several years a number of complaints in regards to speeding. How do we reduce traffic flow? How do we make it safer for pedestrians in our communities? And what we've heard is really outlined in our report. So previous council was looking at an off-road vehicle bylaw and how do we deal with off-road vehicles. So that's been included in this. So some of the changes we're looking at, suggested speed limits. So we actually added speed limits into the bylaw. So a number of bylaws, most of the bylaws across New Brunswick actually have the speed limits indicated in their bylaws. Right now, the speed limits basically in town are 50 kilometers an hour when we're recommending potentially 40 kilometers an hour within town. That's not excluding the mandated 30 kilometer zones for the schools. We did tie in the non-vehicular traffic bylaw that was created by the last council, so that ties back into this. We'll look at the seasonal hop-on, hop-off bus, which council will be discussing later in this agenda. Parking spaces, opening up a bit of parking space along Parr Street and Harriet Street, along that area. One-way street would become a permanent seasonal change, so we're not constantly going back and forth to the bylaw and looking to change it and modify it. When we've surveyed out to the public, we had 85% response rate of, liking it, and we feel that it's actually improved the safety of not just the tourists, but the loading zones within town and how busy it does get on the main street. Restrictions of on-street use and updating of emergency repair aspects, vehicle idling, as we are looking at climate change community and have declared a climate emergency. Looking at vehicle idling is something that council should consider within this process. Again, the off-road vehicles, and then updates to the payment systems, or both the payment systems and allowances for PAPA Act back in, because they actually deal with speeding and they can enforce the speeding fines and speeds. So that's where you'll look in the schedule of fines and fees when we're addressing that. Now, there are some of other reports through here, so looking at stop signs and yield signs. So we have suggestions of maybe looking at the King Street stop signs. We've had a number of instances where people blow through them. They're really they can become dangerous in situations. So, maybe it's a consideration of flashing light stop signs, but we'll leave that to council consideration. Something for council to debate here as well is limited parking. There are a series of limited parking time spaces in town. That'll have to be a discussion of council on bylaw enforcement and how you guys want to address that, because in order to address and ensure those spaces become available, there are enforcement measures that have to be looked at. We're proposing a look at potentially new crosswalk areas. Now, those will have to be looked at in a more budgetary format because curbs would have to be dropped in certain locations. So Princess Royal Street at Water Street, the curbs would have to be dropped there. So that would probably be a 2024 budget consideration, but something for council to consider because that is a fairly busy crossing section as well. Looking at Reed Avenue here right around the arena with people trying to cross to the youth center or just coming across to the arena. So some other areas to look at, as well as in discussions, Thomas Avenue where 302 Mowat. So consideration for another crosswalk within that range. But council, we wanted to give you this as a draft to start and get your mind around and provide feedback on it as well. Options we do have. We can do a council workshop to see what feedback you guys want to provide. We can do an open house with the public to see what their feedback is. And then you would also have your public hearings of objection that would come within the processes. But this bylaw would be a complete revamp. So you'd be looking at 3 readings of council as well as a public hearing within that. So at this point, we wanted to at least get the ball rolling, especially with a new season coming, and these are priority requests that the community has put forward over the last several years. So, Your Worship, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much. So I guess for the discussion purpose, are you going to go through these one by one to get council consensus, or were you thinking of, I know that the bylaw is constructed, how do you think the best way is for council consensus? Council, over to you. Do you kind of like the version before you, or is there concerns on anything that you see? I see a hand already, so we'll start, I guess, getting opinions on what you have before you. Councilor Hurdle, I saw that one, although I can't see them all perfectly.
Yeah, we'll get you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Your Worship. A lot of really great stuff here. There's just, I guess, are you looking for feedback tonight? Would that be good, or are you looking for
Your Worship, either feedback tonight, or you can provide it through email, or if council wishes, we can do a workshop on it so everybody can have open feedback. It's really your choice. This is the first draft of it. I wanted to see what council's sort of overall feel of it is now, but open to any suggestions and changes in which direction council would like to go.
Well, just the only 2 things that I'd like to see a little bit different on this. One would be when you think about the incidence of fatality at 50 kilometers an hour, I think is 40% if a vehicle were to strike a pedestrian, and at 30 kilometers an hour, it drops to 10%. So I'd like to see, if we're looking at the main roads, say, Parr and Water Street, to be 50 in those zones, but the side residential ones, I'd like to see drop to 30 kilometers an hour, just to keep people safe. And just in terms of traffic calming as well on the side streets, I'd like to propose speed bumps are mentioned, but there's also what are called, I think they're called bump outs, which reduce traffic to one lane, and they calm traffic down. They can be gardened as well and landscaped, and they cause traffic to sort of do a chicane through it. They're used in a lot of different communities to calm traffic down. You can't really approach them at speed, so and they look really nice too, and they don't cause damage to your car like a speed bump might if you're doing it wrong. So those are the only 2 things. Everything else looks great. Thank you.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Akaji.
Yep,
Worship.
go ahead, Deputy Mayor Akaji.
I know we had spoken before about the Aboriginal crosswalk. There is one at the community college, but I didn't see it mentioned here. I don't want us to forget that we should put one in. I mean, there's one in St. Stephen, so I'd like to see one in St. Andrews, if that's possible. And I would like to see the whole town at 40, but the school zones still remain at 30. It's 40 already going around the point, but people don't follow that 40.
Yeah, so just for council clarification, the 30-kilometer zone is actually mandated under the Motor Vehicle Act of the province of New Brunswick. We can't touch that one, so...
No, but I'm glad they do have that
Yeah,
one.
they do have that stipulated in town limits where the schools are, so 30 kilometers around the schools is already in effect.
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. So just on the speed limits, does it not make more sense to have one consistent speed throughout the community versus having to put speed, like the the speed on every single street? You know what I mean? If it changes, will that be confusing for tourists and even locals to say, hey, is this one a 40, this one a 50, this one a 30? You know what I mean? Like, would it not make more sense to have one consistent number for the entire historic town plat?
Yeah, that'd be staff's recommendation, Your Worship. Just like you said, we'd have to put a tremendous sign load if we're differentiating it between streets in the plat. I'd rather, with the exception of the 30 at the schools, figure out what the lowest tolerance is, like 40 even, or 30 if you want, and apply that to at least the whole plat. Might be a little different along Reed and Mowat and Bayside, but at least it should be consistent that once you get to the corner of Harriet and Reed and Parr, you can say, okay, now the speed limit's 40 every direction you turn, so you've been warned.
And just for council clarification, we can change the speed limits from the Tim Hortons corner in. Any of the highways coming from Mowat or Bayside Drive or Bayview Drive have to be discussed with the province because they're still technically classified as highway. So we have to discuss with the province and DTI if we can work on changing those speed limits coming into town.
Well, they've dropped it to 50, like it used to be 70, it's now 50, but in the town, I mean, we could drop it to 40, right?
Yeah. Basically, council beyond Tim Hortons and the straight stretch there, you can look at reducing speed limits from there and in the subdivisions is really what you have.
Then you wouldn't have to change the signs around the point, you'd have it already done.
You have comments from Councillor Gumichel.
Thank you, Councilor Michelle.
Thank you. I'd be in favor of having a council workshop on this. We were lucky to have the newly formed Trails Advisory Committee meet last Thursday night, and we got the package on Friday. And they're keen to get going. They had some ideas about different things with regard to speed limits and sidewalks. And there's also members on there from SORTI, which is a local group that came out of the Kiwanis Club, but they're all engineers and they're either engineers or PhDs and me. So they're quite a knowledgeable bunch of people who would hopefully could be involved in a council workshop, because there's a Pandora's box of things we want to, I mean, there's good suggestions, but I don't think we could get into it in a discussion like this. So a workshop would be my preference. Thank you.
Just a
Just
question.
on that note, would just get some consensus from council. Would more people on council prefer to have consensus? There are some conversations I'd love to have about speed bumps and things like that, seasonal ones. I know they're not good in the winter, but over to you, council. Would ML see the value in doing a workshop on this one? It is a large bylaw, and there is some significant changes here for sure.
If I may, Your Worship?
Yep.
I guess there's a couple
All
of
means.
things. Whoop. It's okay, Your Worship, to go
Go
ahead?
ahead.
I guess there's two things. Number one, just to let people know, too, that right now we're still talking about the old St. Andrews, so to speak, from, the water tower in, the Clark Farm Road in, just because the town doesn't have legal jurisdiction yet. That's to be determined. But if there's issues out in the new wards, certainly they can be discussed. We might not be able to put a ball out there, but we can work with the DTI to address concerns. The other thing, too, is that we don't do this bylaw very often, so you may want to workshop it, but before we get too deep into decision-making, you may also want to do some levels of public consultation. And so you can get that before, because it makes it worse if you kind of massage it, go to one or two readings, and then the public gives you a whole bunch of feedback that, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then you have to go back. So I might recommend that maybe we could workshop it. Maybe the workshop is public so people could see what it is. But then maybe we work on a survey of some sort, a mail out or an open house, that people could come in and see kind of what we're recommending and try to get as much information before council goes to at least second reading, if not first reading. The clerk and I can organize most of that, that probably be all completed by mid to late April, or possibly sooner, depending on the speed. But I just think the strategy for something this important, and where a lot of people have opinions, you might want to do wider consultation than typically we would with other bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. I think that is a kind of an appropriate. There's enough significant change here that you would definitely want to weigh into the public to get some insight and to get some early feedback before you go too far along the process. So just as I look at this particular motion, there's a lot of conversations that would need to happen in order to go to first reading. A lot of consensus we would need, like go line by line and get some thought on the changes from the previous one, like even, you know, you get into off-road vehicles, you get into idling, there's a lot of conversations to be had there. So as far as engagement, you would actually, what would be the best way to start that process? Just put this document out there though, or is it where we put what the changes are and we have them in quarters and we gather feedback and like the dining room of the arena? How do you envision that happening, Mr. Spear, if we do go that route?
So I think almost any time if council, I think we could, you know, put out to the staff the draft version of the bylaw with saying this has not gone to first reading. We're starting the process with Mr. Knopper's report that gives the quick and dirty of it, at least to start to put that out on social media. We could also meet, the clerk and I should meet in what public consultation would look like. Probably a workshop would be good so we'd know what we're presenting, so at least council can give us your opinion. I don't know if we necessarily have to go line by line, that we might put out internally some little questionnaire, because there's a lot here. If you want to go line by line, that's good, but it's probably like a 5-hour meeting. So it might be something where we say, here's kind of the recommended changes, what does council think, then we present it back, you know, say 6 of you liked it, 2 of you hated it, or if you want to debate them line by line because you feel strongly about it.
It'd be more the staff report that highlights what the main changes are. We've got to go through what the main changes are and just say, are we aligned, are we not? What's your thoughts?
Your worship.
And, you know, debate speed, 30 or 40, yes.
Just to note, what I can do is I can actually create what I call the red line document. So that actually shows highlighted in red the changes versus the original bylaw. So that'll make it stand out, and I can provide council with both the current bylaw as it is and the draft bylaw. So really council can focus on what the changes are compared to what's currently within the bylaw.
That would make the most sense. And I don't think it'd be an overly long exercise. I actually think that maybe I'm making an assumption, but I think majority of the changes will probably have pretty quick consensus that council supports. There's just a few things that I'd like to slow down and make sure that we're good and make sure that we're obviously not forgetting anything, because it is a fairly long process to update. And then just another question I have that would be good before that is, we're obviously a historic plat. If we put in calming measures and alter the perfectly square grids, I know they'd still be square blocks. Is there any repercussion on the heritage of our designation of our community would be another question that I would have. Maybe it doesn't, but I just would want to make sure before we debate that any further. So council, over to you for what your pleasure is. Do you think it makes sense to, I kind of see a little bit of chicken and egg. It'd be really good to go through the staff changes and say, this is what we're looking at. What's your thoughts versus tell us what you think, because it might be a bunch of noise if you don't do that, right? Like it might be all over the place on people's different opinions, but I'm over to whatever council's preference is. Council, any thoughts? I see Councilor Harlan's hand.
So just a point of clarification, if Mr. Spear, if you put it out on social media to say to people, this is what we're looking at, is there an opportunity for people to provide feedback to staff then, as well as doing potentially an open house? These terms are new to me, so when you say an open house or a workshop, I'm not 100% sure what that means.
Sure. So what open house tends to be is we just open up this council chambers, maybe have like, here's our proposed stop signs, here's a proposed yield, these are, you know, just kind of around, and people can come in at their pleasure. It's not a formal presentation, it's just a drop-in type of thing.
Okay.
A workshop is just essentially like we do here. We sit around the table and we have open debate of each of them. So the open house, after we do that exercise, we'd either have at each station saying, here's what we think of this change, or people can leave a comment, say, what do you think, what else would you like to see?
Okay. And so still, the question is whether we do public consultation prior to us having a kick at the can. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I guess what the mayor's saying, we could go through each of these kind of things tonight to see if you support that, and if there's certain things you don't, then we can pull it out of the current bylaw, then see if anybody else supports it and add it back in later. So it's really, that's council's pleasure. There's no right way, there's just a way, figuring out the strategy to do it. And so it's whatever council would like to do tonight.
I think for tonight, I think that red line document would be that Mr. Knopper, I think to circulate that and then go through the exercise might be very beneficial. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Knopper?
Your worship, that does. That'll give council a good baseline of what the full changes are, what it is, and then we can actually schedule a workshop for the public that would only have one item on it. So it would be like a special meeting that would just be involved of that topic. Council can debate and provide feedback to staff. At that point, any changes to the draft, then we can release that out to the public again, saying that's the open house document, and then feedback can come back from the public. Your worship, I would recommend as the clerk that we do host, if not one, if two, public or open houses to gain as much feedback as possible before you go to first reading. That way, you can say you've gathered information both from the public, both from the past and present, and then you can have a solid document that you can move forward with and amend as you wish for the readings. But recommend council takes the time to do public consultation on this process.
Perfect. A lot of these things you took from probably our transportation master plan as well. Is that safe to say, or is that document really not into play in this?
No, your worship, there were several items that came from multiple bylaws as well as the transportation master plan, and to Councillor Hurdle's comments about traffic calming measures. There are several in our transportation master plan that mention, especially at corners, of how to slow down. Speeds not necessarily have to be the full streets. In regards to our heritage, if they're temporary, then no, I don't believe you would see any issues within our heritage designation because they could be removed, and especially you wouldn't necessarily want them there for snow plowing purposes, so seasonality would also have to be considered within those.
Yeah. Okay. All right, council. What I'm hearing is public consultation before first reading. Question is, do we want to get some consensus on what we're feeling so that way we can weigh that in the public workshops? I have no preference. Maybe just floating this document out and then getting feedback and then council debates it after might be the way to go as well. Does that make sense, Mr. Knopper?
It does, your worship, because this is the first real good draft of the bylaw, so if council wants to work from this as for the workshop, that would be a good recommendation, and then you would have the red line copy as well, so then you would have both copies in front of you to make educated decisions.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, council, does that make sense that we let staff go to consultation with some open houses, and then with some of the changes, they'll provide feedback of what they heard, and then at that point, we go through the red line document ourselves and make sure we're comfortable with everything based on the feedback from the public?
You've got council consensus, your worship.
Thank you. I couldn't see it. I appreciate that. Okay, so I think we've talked about that one long enough. I appreciate everybody providing some input. We are now moving into motions, so I'll pass over to Councillor Hurdle for business, tourism, heritage, and culture.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is in reference to BTHC 230207. The subject is the Huntsman Marine, Huntsman Marine Science Center Hop-On, Hop-Off Bus Pilot Project for 2023. And the background is that the Huntsman Marine Science Center has partnered with Kingsbrae Garden, the Algonquin Hotel, and the Kiwanis Club of St. Andrews to pilot a hop-on, hop-off bus program between July and August of 2023. The program will target to run on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays for 8 weeks, operating from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. The bus will be free to use by residents and tourists thanks to the sponsors. Please see the attached map for a view of the proposed route. There will be 6 stops located on the route, including Huntsman Marine Science Center, Queen at King Street near the Anglican Church to ensure a safe drop-off and pickup point without stopping on Water Street, Kiwanis Club Campground, Kingsbrae Garden, the Algonquin Hotel, and the Welcome Center at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex. The route is anticipated to take 35 minutes for the full circuit. The Huntsman has met with the mayor and senior staff on the project. The Huntsman has requested support from the town for the purchase and installation of bus stop signs with a request to have benches at each location, if possible, and to update the vehicular traffic bylaw to reflect any additional bus stop locations. This pilot project meets with the recommendations of the Transportation Master Plan and the Municipal Plan for the town of St. Andrews. The motion before us is that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews supports the pilot project for the Huntsman Marine Science Center hop-on, hop-off bus and supports the installation of bus stop signage for the 2023 season. And I so move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hurdle. Seconder for that motion. I've got Deputy Mayor Akaji. I got lots of secondaries. So that's been seconded. Any discussion on this one? Councillor Blanchard.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think it's a great idea. I really like it. I would like to know, and I guess once we get through this, it would be great to know or great to see the cost to operate this service per month. I know this is a pilot, and this is being funded largely by some of our, I'm not actually sure how much it doesn't say how much we're actually investing here versus the private businesses in town. But to me, this is something very worthwhile. And I really would like to see even, and I know this is a pilot project, but I'd like to see it expanded. I'd like to see it run out even up to Mowat to the bar with the new developments going in there. I think that would be a great service that we could provide, especially where we talked about that's where a lot of our new development is going to, and it would provide some access to the downtown for the folks up there, especially seniors who may have some mobility issues. Walking if it's a fair distance to get to the downtown. Having that service, I think, would be great. I think it would be great if we could loop it through and cross it even Cornelia or something like that and just have that loop. I'd like to see Cornelia paved, but that's a bigger discussion. But even right now, if it extended up to the bar, and we even talked about at the Bar Road possibly having that as a trailhead. We talked about that before. Maybe there, like I said, if there's parking there, people are walking. Again, opportunity to leave their cars at that trailhead or something like that. I know we talked even about a trailhead down by the Huntsman there as well. So opportunities for folks to leave their cars somewhere else outside of the downtown core, the business core, and use that hop-on, hop-off service. I think it would be fantastic. Anyways, it'd be interesting to see where it goes, the costs, and what it would cost for us to maybe continue this service or partner, and even get the province involved maybe as public transportation. Because, especially in the rural areas, I mean, municipalities and stuff, they have access, I think, to public transportation dollars. We really don't. Like, there really isn't the opportunity. This, to me, would be a good opportunity for us to maybe access some of those dollars. So I love the initiative. I hope it goes well, but I'd be interested to see overall cost and what it would cost us to continue it in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Blanchard. So as Mr. Spear indicated, I did meet with him and Huntsman, as I'm, like you, a big ambassador of improving transportation around the town of St. Andrews and Charlotte County for that matter. It's a major barrier. Thanks to Dial-A-Ride and places like that, we make do, but to not have a regular route, it is very challenging for people. There's a lot of places that you'd love to see it connect to. I'll give Anchor's Landing as an example, to get people to the downtown. So the idea behind this was really it was a pay to play in the first year because they wanted people that were going to contribute to make it get off the ground. And the whole point about this would be to get a lot of key learning to improve it. The Huntsman has been very open about the fact that a good challenge, but a challenge might be it's an 11-passenger bus. If the demand does take off, they're willing to actually invest and get a larger bus for the community that would go through the route. So when it came to the route, the other factor that was very important is you don't want it to take 70 minutes to go through a lap before it comes back around. So they were trying to keep it minimal stops. The goal was to keep it around 30 minutes, so that way it could go by twice an hour. But there's some real big benefit here with parking limitations in the downtown. Stopping at the visitor center would give an opportunity for vehicles to maybe park at the arena. There's a lot of opportunity here. Maybe someday, if it is very popular, it could go to the water tower, to the NBCC, for example, and use those parking lots. But it'll be really interesting to see what the response is. As far as cost, I'll reach out to Mr. Bridger. I'm sure he would be fine with me sharing those to council because they've been very open and transparent throughout that process. But I'll confirm that for you and get those off to you. But I'm excited to see where this could go. It could be the beginning of actually having a transportation system in the town of St. Andrews.
You have Councillor Gumichel.
Thank you. Just a quick question.
Just wondering why it goes clockwise, I guess, instead of counterclockwise. I do see that it was to ensure a safe drop-off and pickup point without stopping on Water Street, but Water Street is a lot wider than the other streets, and I don't see why it wouldn't come down Water Street, turn up to the Anglican Church and turn around there somewhere, come back down Water Street, and go in the other direction. But I do applaud the effort. Just think maybe it should go the other way around. Thank you.
Mr. Spear, do you want to add anything on that, to why that is?
Well, one thing, it has to go counterclockwise because it's a one-way street in Water Street.
One-way street.
So if it
we'd
was
like to
coming,
keep at least a little bit of traffic.
if it was coming down Water Street, it'd be going one way.
Yeah, but that's why it's going counterclockwise, like you said, do want to go clockwise. But he was trying to avoid the downtown core with the bus. He's just thinking if you have trucks stopping and stuff, it might be a little bit ornery. And then it was to put the parking on, for the bus door to be on the same side as the Anglican Church too.
I'm still not following why. So if you go in the opposite direction, you're going to get people on Augustus and what is that, Parr Street, are going to have the bus going by every 30 minutes rather than the bus going up and down the front street. It's just a matter of figuring out a way to turn it around if it was going in the opposite direction. Perhaps I'm missing something there, but. So you're taking the bus off of Water Street, going around in this direction. It has to go the other way around the one-way street, but if it was going down Water, like from Harriet down Water in that direction, it could stay on Water except for you just have to figure out the pickup spot. So it would be less buses through town versus buses on the front street.
Well,
I don't want to slow down the effort. I just think it should go in the opposite direction.
Okay, well, we'll talk because it hasn't been completely finalized.
Okay.
But it
Thank
was
you.
a preferred route, yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, no, just on that point, I'm sure they'd be up for discussion. It is about having, the reason it's not stopping downtown is because there's no room for it to stop downtown. It is going to be branded. Huntsman's logos are going to be on the side of it. I'm sure there's a real value in that going, if it's once an hour in downtown St. Andrews during peak time in July and August. I'd say there's some value for Huntsman as well in that.
Councillor Hurdle.
Thank you. And just along with Councillor Blanchard's comments as well, just usage data overall, like if they'd be tracking usage, that we could have that at the end of the season so we could take a look and see how many people are actually taking part in it. And just to be clear as well, this will be fully managed and operated by Huntsman and for liability purposes and like management purposes. So all that questions will be directed towards the Huntsman, not towards the town.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. And the data is something that has been requested by all of the partners.
And council, just so you're aware, we also requested a potential survey out to the riders so we can get further feedback, and the Huntsman was open to that. So you have Councillor Harlan.
And just a point of clarification again, so the motion, in the background, it talks about the request to have benches at each location, but in the motion, it just talks about signage.
Through you, Your Worship, just to note, a bench costs about $2,500 now. So what we want to do is, they're not cheap anymore. So what we want to do is investigate where may be the best option to put a bench and see what we have for spare benches within our system that we currently have. So we'll be looking at that. But at least for now, they said if we could, great. If not, at least have the bus stop signs up and ready to go.
I just think that in terms of uptake, that could be one of the issues, particularly for seniors, if they are able to have some place to sit while they're waiting, because it's going to take a 35-minute loop, right? So I think it is something to consider, and our benches are a bit few and far between in parts of the town. So
And we maybe investigate what a certain style of bench. So the benches that are 2,500 are the ones along the front street that we try to get everywhere with the decorative metal and I think we're using wood, non-wood, plastic-sized wood materials right now, laminate, if you will, for the things for prolonged life. And so for this particular project, we might be able to go with something that is just purely wood. That would be a little easier, that isn't as decorative, but would do the job, at least for the pilot project.
right, and that could be just seasonal, right? Yeah.
And some of on that note, some of the partners that are involved with this, whether it be the campground or they probably have their own benches that they might be able to allocate towards the project for their visitors.
Deputy Mayor Akji.
Deputy Mayor Acton.
Your Worship, I think this is a great initiative. As you know, we used the hop-on, hop-off bus with Canada Day, and it worked well. I mean, we didn't get a lot of people using it, but the people that were using it was fantastic. they've, certainly Huntsman has put a lot of effort into this, and it would be well worthwhile. Some of those benches, like in front of the Anglican Church, already has benches. There are some down at the point. So some already have benches that might need to be moved, maybe, 500 meters or something, but they're there. So that's another thing to look at. But as far as the benches go, I think that's an important issue for seniors that are going to be using this. And I think if it goes like to Anchor's Landing, eventually if it expands, it's going to be great that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just on that note, it is important to note that the Tourism Accommodation Product Development Fund would certainly be applicable to this particular project.
And Council, just to note, we did provide the Huntsman, if their pilot project is successful, they're interested in applying for the Rural Transit Fund through the federal government, which has nearly $15 billion in funding for specifically these types of projects. So there is opportunity growing, and it's still available over the next 3 years. So the funding is still there.
I also know that the Legion at one point had offered out benches, and they were bought by families for the veterans. So there may be, a way that they could reach out as well for these benches. Thanks.
Absolutely. And we do have a memorial bench program within the town of St. Andrews, so maybe we advertise that people might want to participate in that, just because some of these are really good locations as well throughout the community. Any other questions on this one? Otherwise, I'll call the question.
Oh, Councillor Blanchard.
Yeah, just a comment. I think it would be nice to have a consistent look to all the stops as well. So I'm just, talking about some of the other businesses, if they had benches to donate, might be, I don't know. I think it would just be nice if there was a consistent look to all the stops.
Sounds good. There is no cost in this motion, so I'm assuming that as things present themselves, Mr. Spear, you'll be bringing this back before council. Is that a safe assumption?
It is, Your Worship, and I guess probably the biggest challenge logistically, it will take a little bit of parking out of the downtown area. So on the map, each of those yellow stops is going to have to be designated parking for just this particular project. And, staff doesn't see any issues with that, but there'll be those that may disagree with us.
Because people will use the hop-on, hop-off bus. They might not take their car downtown anymore. Maybe. Just saying.
Yeah. A lot of it's just along, the different bit, like the down by the campground. There's where the interpretive place used to be. Kingsbury would be actually going in their parking lot. Algonquin, I'm not sure 100% where that is, but it's the one that's down by the church, which would be the one that really is limiting, because we'd want to keep that open so it can just pull in and pull out.
Councillor Hurdle?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just one last point. I wonder if we could propose a stop at the grocery store. That could possibly take a lot of cars out of the downtown core, and there's space there that would really help a lot of folks who might not necessarily want to drive their cars, at least in the tourist season, down to get something like groceries.
That's a fair point, because it's still, if you're carrying groceries, it's still a few blocks away, like 3 probably in reality, right? So that's a lot of your senior in our community that just picked it up, say at the arena or something. So yeah, we can make that recommendation, right, Mr. Spears? Is that safe to say?
We can, Your Worship. It's going to change the route a little bit, but we certainly can manage that. At least even the pickup lane, they could do a quick stop there when available.
Yeah, and the other thing that we don't know is if it's 35 minutes, that it's not going to run twice an hour, so it might be once an hour type rotation. So it might make sense, if that's the case, to maybe add a couple spots. But lots of discussion on this. I guess it will be coming back before council. So I guess really what you're looking for, Mr. Spear, in this motion is to see that if council supports the idea, you'll continue to work on it and find out what the costing is. Is that a safe assumption?
It is, Your Worship, and I guess that we can ask the Huntsman again, who's the primary sponsor for this, about your suggestions. But again, they weren't asking for much for suggestions, so we'll see. We'll ask that this council would like to try this, to combine it between tourism, which was their key thing, to try to get tourists moving to key locations, with the rural transportation thing, which I think would increase usage as well, and see if they're open to just making some amendments to make it more user-friendly for those that live in town and not just the people visiting the town.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'm
further
not seeing
questions.
anyone, so I will call the question. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
All
It's
carried.
everybody, this motion has been carried. All right, that wraps up business, tourism, heritage, culture. We're now into recreation, community services. Councillor Gumashell is the star this evening with quite a few motions. Over to you, Councillor Gumashell.
Lucky me. Thank you, Your Worship. RCS 230209, submitted by myself, and the subject is appointments to the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee. The background reads, the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee is bringing forward for council consideration and appointment 2 or 3 new members to the committee. The chair of the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee is recommending the following persons to be appointed: Dr. Gary Irwin Kenyon, James Steele, and Rob Weir. Please see the attached background document for a brief description of both appointees as per terms of reference Article 7.2. The membership term of the advisory committee members shall initially be for 1 year, with an extension of up to 3 years thereafter based on recommendations from the chair of the advisory committee. The length of the term of the members shall be staggered as much as possible to ensure that the advisory committee can function effectively. And the motion reads, that the council of the town of St. Andrews appoints the following persons to the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee for a 1-year term with possible extension. Firstly, Dr. Gary Irwin Kenyon. Secondly, James Steele. And thirdly, Rob Weir, moved by myself.
Thank you, Councillor Gumashell. Seconder? Councillor Harlan, thank you. Any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any. All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's everybody that has been carried. Next motion.
The next motion is RCS 230210, submitted by myself, and the subject is Community Assistance Grants 2023, and the background reads, each year the Council of the Town of St. Andrews budgets funds to support ongoing programming or projects that assist individuals, organizations, and groups in St. Andrews and the surrounding area. In 2023, Council budgeted $17,500 for the Community Assistance Grants. As the deadline on February 14, 2023, as of the deadline, the town has received 13 applications for funding that support various projects, recreational programs, and services for the community. Please see attached for background information as the grants being applied for. Note that the current Community Assistance Grants budget is at $15,900 after Council supported the NBCC Accessible Planners Program for the Community Garden. Council can amend any of the proposed staff recommended grant funding motions. It is recommended that during the considerations for funding, that Council keeps a small portion of the grant funding available for any future requests in 2023. And then the action, and so I'll just read down through the motions and one by one. Okay. Motion that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $500 towards Charlotte County Ground Search and Rescue for the new office chairs for the mobile command post. And I would make that motion.
Seconder
Oh,
for
I don't
that
know how much
motion.
it's for.
I got Councillor Bennett.
Okay, for 500.
Discussion on this motion.
Oh, I do know how it's.
Just for council's information, the Regional Service Commission, in order to purchase the unit, did make a contribution to that. I don't have the amount right in front of me since I'm traveling, but I don't even want to quote it, but it was shared across the region as well. Any other comments on this one?
Councillor Hurdle.
Councillor Hurdle?
Just for, thank you, Worship. Just for information purposes, the way I guess the information was presented, maybe I'm wrong, but it looked like there wasn't enough funding to cover all of the ones that were suggested. That we have to make a determination between which ones we do want to move forward with and which ones we don't, because it looked like we were over budget. Maybe I was reading it wrong.
The recommendations we made keep us within budget, but you'll notice there's 2 or 3 blanks on 2 or 3 of them too. That decision have to be made. And if you read the grant application, some of them are significant,
Right.
which would take us over the top for sure.
Thank you.
I'll note,
Good
Council,
point. Any other
sorry, Your
questions?
Worship. I'll note that, Council, the ones that staff are putting forward are ones that we would consider worthy enough based on the grant applications and the processes. The ones that you have to debate are the more high ask ones.
Okay, any other on the, as far as the Charlotte County Ground Search and Rescue? Okay, then I'll call the question. All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And just to make sure, just because it's a ways away, anyone contrary minded? Seeing none, so that has been carried. Thank you, council. And Charlotte County Search and Rescue certainly logs a lot of volunteer hours in the run of a year, so it's always great to see the support there. Next motion, Councillor Michelle.
Indeed. Motion that the council of the town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $500 towards the New Brunswick Wood Carving Association setup fee for the grade 12 graduating class from Sir Jamestown Academy. And I'd make that motion.
Seconder for that motion. I've got Councillor Blanchard. Discussion on that one. Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that's everybody. That has been carried as well. Next motion.
Thank you, Worship. The next motion is that the council of the town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $500 towards St. Andrews Pickleball to support ongoing rental costs of the MBCC gym and support for insurance coverage. And I'd make that motion.
Seconder for that motion. Got Deputy Mayor Akaji. Any discussion on this one? We did receive, just for new councilors, newer councilors, information. We did receive a number of letters earlier in 2022 with residents asking us to try to figure out solutions for pickleball in the community. So I don't remember how many letters it is, Mr. Knopper. There were several, was there not?
I would say over a dozen, at least.
All right, then, if I'm seeing nothing else, I'll call the question. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye. That's everybody. That has been carried. The next one.
The next motion, Your Worship, that the council of the town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $500 towards Charlotte County Fair's request for support of the 2023 Fall Fair.
And do you move?
No, I didn't make that motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover for that one? Not seeing him. Oh, I've got Councillor Harland and a seconder for that motion.
Hurdle.
I got Councillor Hurdle. Seems like we're just reluctantly maybe putting it on the table. I guess we'll open this one up for discussion. Would anyone like to open it up? I will, I guess, open it up just to say that there has been requests in the past that the town of St. Andrews has considered. I think the concern is when the event doesn't happen within the community and you're using municipal tax dollars for that. It was a bit of a slippery slope. I believe it was, I forget what one it was, but it was an event in St. John. I think it was a theater company, if I'm mistaken. But I guess that's where that whole conversation came from. So over to you guys to open this up for debate. Councillor Hurdle.
Well, I would just like to say that, thank you, Your Worship, that there are a lot of artists in our community that live here and work here who do perform there, and it's a stage for them to actually showcase their talent where they might not have it elsewhere. And so I think it is worthy of our consideration.
Thank you very much, Councillor Herb. Seconder, or sorry, anyone else?
If I may, Your Worship.
Councillor Harlan?
Oh. I would agree with Councillor Hurdle. I also think that it is well supported by residents of St. Andrews who attend the Charlotte County Fall Fair. And I think that there are times when we do, as a county, need to look at initiatives that we support our two other areas, now Eastern Charlotte County and St. Stephen. I think there are times where, and this is one initiative that really supports us coming together as a county.
Thank you, Councillor Harlan. Mr. Spear, you had a comment?
Yeah, just to confirm what Councillor Harlan was saying was I was talking to the St. George CAO, or sorry, the Eastern Charlotte CAO, and they are going to be supporting it as well. So it's going outside. Other outside communities are considering it too.
It's a good point for the discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Spear. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that has been carried. Next motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next motion is that the council of the town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $500 towards Charlotte County Pride for upcoming events planned for 2023, including family picnics, a parade, and free films. I'd make that motion.
Seconder for that one, I've got Councillor Blanchard again. I believe the parade is scheduled to be in St. Andrews based on some communication that I received, Mr. Spear, is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. I'll let them announce the dates, but it's in June 17th, I think, for sure. But they had to do a little bit of logistics before they confirmed.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this one?
This Father's Day is
Okay.
busy that day, right?
That's the race. Yeah. It's a Saturday, though.
All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's everybody. That one has been carried. Next motion.
The next motion, Your Worship, is that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $1,000 towards the St. Andrews Paddling Club for funding to support the further training of volunteers to become paddling coaches. I'd make that motion.
And a seconder for that one. Deputy Mayor Akaji won that one. Discussion? All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's everybody. That's been carried. And we're on to the next one.
The next motion, Your Worship, is that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $1,000 towards the St. Andrews Civic Trust Incorporated for funding to support the revitalization of the heritage walking maps. And I'd make that motion.
Thank you. A seconder for that one. I've got Councillor Harlan. Any discussion on that one? All in favor of approving this motion, again, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's everyone. That has been carried. The next one I will declare my conflict of interest on, and I'll let Deputy Mayor Akaji continue with Councillor Gumichel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Gumichel, the next motion, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the motion reads that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $1,500 from the Albert McCoy Trust Fund towards the Vincent Massey Elementary Home and School Association to support an additional day per week of music training for students. I'll make that motion.
Okay, and seconder, can I have a seconder, please? Harlan, Councillor Harland? Any comments, council? Oh, here.
Council, just so you know, this fund doesn't actually come directly out of the community assistance grants that you've budgeted. So for clarification, for the public, the town does hold several trusts that can be drawn down each year. And the Albert McCoy Trust Fund is for music programs and music education for youth in their community. So just wanted to bring clarification to the council.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Knopper. Any other further comments? Oh, Councillor Blanchard, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification then, the request was for 2,000 initially, right? Correct?
Correct.
Why was the recommendation just for 15? I know it's coming from a different trust. Is it just limited funds in that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, last year's markets weren't real healthy.
Right.
So the availability's down. If council feels so, you could make an amendment to add $500 from assistance grants to top it up.
Okay. No, I trust the judgment of staff on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchard. Anybody else? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I have to excuse myself for the next two.
We'll switch. Mr. Knopper, Mr. Spear, we just want to let me know when the deputy mayor has left the room.
You're good, Your Worship.
All right. Councillor Gumichel, the next one.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next motion reads that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $2,500 towards Charlotte County Dial-A-Ride for the continued support of their programming in St. Andrews and the surrounding area. And I'd make that motion.
Seconder, please, for that motion. I've got Councillor Hurdle, I believe, on that one. Discussion on this one? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That one's been approved and carried forward. Thank you. Next one.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next motion reads that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $3,000 towards the First Nations Drum Making Workshop to continue with education and knowledge sharing for truth and reconciliation. And I would make that motion.
And I'll look for a seconder again for that one. I've got Councillor Neal with that one. And we'll open that one up for discussion. Okay, there is none, so I'll call the question. All in favor of approving that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that's everybody that's been carried. I look forward to hopefully attending that one.
Your worship, just
it
hold a
fills
second
up.
so we can bring back.
Yeah, it fills up
Mayor.
quick. And we'll wait for Deputy Mayor Akji to
Which
return.
was the request in these blanked ones? Should we say that? So they asked for 7,500?
Welcome back, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Gubishel, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next motion reads that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of $2,000 in assistance towards the St. Andrews Arts Council for arts and music programming. And I'd like to make that motion.
And a seconder for that one? I've got, Councilor Blanchard, Councilor Neal are almost in unison there. Tie will go to Councilor Hurdle because I think I've got Councilor Blanchard for more this evening. So Councilor Hurdle seconded. Any discussion on that one? All right, all in favor of approving that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's everyone that's been approved. And we're on to the next motion, which is a blank, but yeah, we'll go from there. Councilor Gubishel.
The motion reads that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of blank, and the request was for $7,248 towards the Charlotte County Archives to support the ongoing tour operations at the courthouse and jail for the 2023 season.
Can I have a mover for that one?
Shouldn't we determine the amount first, or no, we'll debate
Should
it?
we put the amount in first?
Your worship, you would put the amount in first, and then you would debate an amendment to that.
Yeah, I think we just get it on the table, right, to make sure we want to discuss it, and then we amend it. Is that what you said, Mr. Dopper?
Correct, Your Worship.
So for
Yeah, so
74.
I think I saw Councilor Neal move. I need a seconder.
Councillor Gumashell would have moved, Your Worship, so
Yeah,
Councillor Neal would have
I make that
seconded.
motion.
Okay, I didn't hear that, so that's okay. Thank you, Councilor Gubishel. So this motion, Council, is, from my understanding of reading the report and the submission, is to pay for staffing for the summer for, I believe it was 3 students. Is that correct, Mr. Dopper, Mr. Spear?
You're right, Your Worship. That's correct.
Yeah, so it was to take advantage of the other, there's other programs between the federal and provincial government, which will help pay, I believe, 75%. And this would be to pay their 25% of the students. So, council, it's a blank. You know, that's a large one out of this budget. There's no question about it. I don't have it right in front of me on this page. Do you know how much we've spent out of this budget by approving all these motions by chance? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I think that's important for council to know. And then we'll just take a moment here, put them on the spot, just because I think that's important for these next 2 motions.
There's $3,900 left, Your Worship, for the next 2 motions.
Okay, and that's spending the entire year's budget?
Yes. If I may, Your Worship, too.
Yep.
So there's just a couple of things, Council, just to remember, is that I guess we already gave an earlier motion to support them by $1,000 for the heritage map, which is important. We also have a contract the previous council signed to pay their power bill. They were supposed to be responsible for it. The province always paid it. We took over the facility. They didn't have the asset, so that's about $3,000 a year that we're already providing on top. Plus, we're keeping up the building, so this past year, we replaced the roof and added several windows to the building. And I guess it's significant contribution for any one organization, is staff's concern. It's not speaking to their worth, it's not speaking to what they do or anything like that. It's just, it's a lot of money to be devoted to one organization within the town. And, you know, we support everything with that building too, not just, they may pay their own phone bill, but everything else is back to the town of St. Andrews. So I just thought you should have that information as you deliberate this.
Thank you for that, Mr. Spear. I appreciate that. Council, I guess my only thing that jumps out to me in addition, obviously, to that would be it would be really good if we really understood what the future of the courthouse was soon, because there's a lot of money that we're putting towards this building right now, and I know people tore it, but it's right now, in my personal opinion, it's a surplus building by the town of St. Andrews, and that doesn't take away from the fact that it has heritage and it has significance. It doesn't at all. It's just we're not properly utilizing the building right now. It is not regularly serving community purposes that I'm aware of on a regular basis, that that the taxpayer is keeping this building going now. So I've got a little bit of concern over the long-term plan for that building is kind of in the back of my mind when I read this motion. But Council, over to you for some comment.
Councillor Harland, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So we continue to provide support to the courthouse, but did we provide them with a grant last year?
Through Your Worship, no, because we did provide additional funds of repairs as well as covering the power costs, as CAO Spear mentioned. The last time they received a grant fund was 2021, and that they did receive some funds from the town.
Okay. And just
$500, yeah.
And just to clarify, my understanding is they're requesting or applying for 3 students, and this is to provides the additional money that isn't given through the grant process, correct?
Typically, the student funding is for 50%.
Right.
And I just found out 2 weeks ago, but everybody else knows, is minimum wage has gone up to $14.75 now. So that means they'll have to be, for each student, they'll have to come up with 20 hours at 15, so $300 or $400 per student per week plus benefits to keep this program going.
And so do we have the ability to request a presentation from someone who's looking for a grant? Because I guess I'm a little unclear. I'm less clear about this request than I am about any of the other requests, because I don't know as much about this, the organization and the intent of where we're going with the organization.
To answer that question, at any point, we could just table it and revisit it after we've got more information. So if you would like to have a presentation, personally, for the next motion, I'd like a little additional information of what the total project cost is, unless I missed that in the application, and what the actual plans are for the renovations. I know it was to hire carpenters, but not to get too far ahead of myself, I would like additional information for the next motion. So I hear you on requesting that for sure. Councilor Hurdle.
Thank you, Your Worship. In my mind, and I could be speaking on my own here, it seems like, and again, nothing taken away from either of these organizations, this is a much larger ask, and it seems to be probably, in my mind, more part of a budgetary conversation than it is about a grant conversation. So I mean, I understand the summertime is coming quickly for them, and they're under the gun to get this stuff done, but I think this is a larger conversation for us to have about the future of both of these organizations and how the town can better partner with them for a longer-term budgetary partnership, as opposed to looking at this from a grant lens alone.
Thank you, Councilor Hurdle. I do concur with those comments for sure. Anyone else?
Councillor Weir.
I got Councilor Ware.
Well, I concur with the fact that the town is putting a substantial amount of money into this building, virtually supporting the building, and then there's a group on the side that's operating it. So it is a budget consideration, because we have so many, I hate to use the word hidden, but hidden costs of electricity and repairs and all these types of things that, seem to be forgotten about when grant applications are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ware, for those comments. Any other member of council? I'm going to try to get some consensus on that here soon.
So, Your Worship, do you mind if I step in for 2 seconds?
By all means.
So, Council, we have been working on with a consultant to do a full analysis as to what are the next steps of the courthouse, the jail, and some of our other museum assets. So that's coming forward, and we're hoping tentatively the spring here we'll start to see some public consultation with that. So perhaps just to give council an idea, we are moving forward with that process coming up shortly. So just keep that in your minds as well.
Thank you. Council, I'm going to look for, I guess, I guess I'm looking for direction more than anything. We have a mover and a seconder on the table. We have no amount to plug in here. Over to you, council, if you'd like to put in an amount, if you'd like to table this for more information, to have a conversation with them, or you'd like to just defeat the motion. That's an
Councillor
option
Hurley,
as
your
well by
worship?
just voting no. Is that correct, Mr. Knopper? They could just vote against this motion and it would squash any grant. Is that correct?
You're correct, Your Worship. So if council defeated it, then there would be no further discussion on funds in that way. If council tabled it, it opens up the discussion for at a later point for consideration. Councillor Hurdle's got a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Hurdle?
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I guess my mind, we have $3,900 left in that ballpark. I think that that's a matter of public record. We can go back to the applicants and saying that this is your request, this is what we have. What's your recommendation? Would you like us to come back to this as a larger partnership and budgetary conversation, or what do you want us to try to do with this? I mean, prettier than that.
Thank you. Sounds like you're saying you'd like to table. I will add that.
Yes, Your Worship.
Traditionally, in the years that I've been on council, we don't spend it all on this first meeting because there is kind of pop-up requests that happen throughout the year that are very good for the community that we'd like to reserve funds for as well, just to be cognizant of. But it sounds like are you moving to table this? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, I've got a mover to table. Can I have a seconder to table?
I'll second.
I've got lots of, Deputy Mayor, I got lots of seconders. So all in favor of tabling this motion?
Aye.
That's everybody. This has been tabled. So we'll go back and maybe Mr. Spear, Mr. Knopper, have a conversation with them. Just let council know that it's part of a bigger conversation. And I would tend to agree it's a small pot of money. And if you're giving $7,000, $8,000 to an organization, it doesn't leave a whole lot left for the rest of the small organizations that are asking $500 to $1,000 on average, sometimes up to $2,500 as we see for an organization like Charlotte Dollaride. And that's all we give them in the run of a year. Next motion.
The last motion for me is that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews approves a grant of an amount to be determined, $7,500 towards the Sunbury Shores Arts and Nature Center to support the upgrades to their multi-purpose studio space.
Okay, so you put in the $7,500. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Akaji. Okay, we'll open this one up for discussion. Over to you, council. Myself, maybe I missed it, but I think I need more information on what first of all, to me, it's a budget thing. Obviously, we don't have that much money in this budget, but B, I actually don't know what the total cost of this project is. There's no visual of what it will become. I just have a number of questions. This one might be worthwhile a presentation to me to find out what their vision is for the space, but over to you, council. Yeah, Councillor Hurdle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just request to table this discussion.
Thank you. A seconder for that motion? I've got Councillor Ware. Any discussion on tabling? All in favor of tabling this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's everybody that has been tabled. We are off the Councillor Gumashell show and on to the Councillor Heenan. He's not here. It's Planning and Economic Development. So because Councillor Harlan has been appointed to the PAC, I think it would only be fitting if she leads these motions. Not to throw her on the spot.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. So this is reference number PED 230206, submitted by myself, Councillor Harland. The subject is appointment of Planning Advisory Committee members, and the background is as follows. The Planning Advisory Committee for the Town of St. Andrews is seeking to fill 2 vacant seats on the committee. The positions were posted in early January, and the town received 4 applicants for consideration. As part of local governance reform, the PAC was hoping to add representatives from Bayside and Shamcook. By selecting 2 representatives from Bayside and Shamcook, Council is meeting the PAC's request for members from the new wards. Provided with this report are copies of applications submitted with 2 from St. Andrews, 1 from Shamcook, and 1 from Bayside. Under the Town of St. Andrews Council's members' policy for the Planning Advisory Committee, it is Council's responsibility to appoint new members to the committee. Note that under the Town of St. Andrews Rules of Operation and Procedure Planning Advisory Committee, the committee has to consist of a minimum of 5 members and not more than 9 members, with council members not comprising more than 1/3 of the committee. In speaking with the chair of the committee, it is recommended that the committee remains at 7 members. Note that appointments to the PAC are for a minimum of 2-year terms. The clerk will have follow-up information from the Planning Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, from the review of applications to the PAC. The motion is that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews appoints the following residents to the Planning Advisory Committee for a term of 2 years. The first one being John Tanner of Shamcook, and the second Jeremiah Kerr of Bayside. And this is so moved by myself.
Thank you very much. A seconder for that one. I bet Councilor Kumashell won that race. Any discussion on this one? I don't think it's, I think, you know, they're very qualified individuals. I think that we're looking to get more representation from the wards. So Shamcook, Bayside, good to see 1 from each. Over to you, Council, if you have any questions or comments. Seeing none.
No,
I got
Councilor Hurdle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarity, the short list came from the desire to have 1 from each of the ridings, Bayside and Shamcook, and that was where they came from?
Through Your Worship, that's correct. Now, to note that we do keep the other applications on file, so if there are other openings throughout the period, so like next January, we'll be 2+ years into a PAC, so there will be potential opportunities for replacement or additions. So not to say that the 2 members from St. Andrews didn't have very strong applications, just for now that it was PAC's request was just 1 from Bayside, 1 from Shamcook.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second, any more questions or comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving these 2 members to the PAC, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No one opposed, so that has been carried. And the last motion for this evening.
So this is reference number PED 230207, submitted by myself, Councillor Harland, and the subject is TSA 2022-13 Champlain Avenue Housing Development Request for Proposal. Under the direction of Council, staff released the request for proposal TSA 2022-13 Champlain Avenue Housing Development on October 5th, 2022. During the intake period, 6 companies were noted to take a copy of the RFP. As of the closing date of December 5th, 2022, only 1 company had submitted an RFP for consideration. Provided with this report is a copy of the RFP submitted. Staff has provided the scoring matrix evaluation to Council on the 1 submission. Based on the RFP submitted, there is an affordability component that has been identified. However, there is a significant ask for additional funds from the town to support the project in addition to the allotted land being considered. Staff recommends that Council not award the request for proposal TSA 2022-13 Champlain Avenue Housing Development at this time, based on request for funding from the town. Council needs to discuss and debate the RFP and the recommendation by staff. Council can amend the motion presented based on debate. So the motion is that the Council of the Town of St. Andrews not award the request for proposal for TSA 2022-13 Champlain Avenue Housing Development. Moved by myself, Councillor Harland.
Thank you, Councillor Harland. Seconder? Councillor Neal. We're open up for discussion at this particular point. Council, any comments that you'd like to give to this? Okay, I'm seeing none. I do want to add some context, though. I'd like to thank, first of all, I believe it's Castle Rock Properties, is that the name? Let me just grab it here. Castle Rock Properties Limited.
correct.
For submitting this. We've done a lot of talk about housing in this community. We appreciate any proposal when it comes to affordable housing. This particular development would have been looking at adding 36 units, 22 which would be for sale at market value, and 14 that would be at non-market value, so subsidized housing for 14 of the units. And when it comes to the RFP, in addition to the land, there was a financial ask from the town of St. Andrews, and that really seems to be the piece that council is having a hard time with. But nonetheless, I do want to thank them for looking at this particular opportunity, and should this go where it's been defeated, hopefully there'll be a future opportunity for them within the community. So is there anyone else from council that would like to add on to that, or are you ready for me to call the question? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of this motion, which would be to not award the RFP, please signify by saying aye. That is everybody, so that means that motion has been carried. There is nothing under new business. Mr. Knopper is, I guess to start, is there anyone that is on the Zoom panel that has a question?
I'll post it out. We have one person in attendance. For those that are in attendance, do you have a question on the council agenda? Please raise your hand on Zoom. Last call, please your hand on Zoom if you've got a question. Your worship, no questions from Zoom. We have nobody in the audience here, and I've received no email questions throughout the night.
Thank you very much. So that'll move us into Councillor Deputy Mayor's comments. Any comment by any member of Council or Deputy Mayor? Okay.
Nope.
Yep.
Nope.
We've got two.
Hold on, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor Akergy first.
Let Councillor Huckins go first, but that's good. Oh, here we go again. Councillor Harland. I keep mixing up the name. Old age. First of all, I want to say today was Shrove Tuesday Pancake Tuesday as we prepare for Lent and the Easter season. So I went down to the Pancake Tuesday, and as always, I meet a lot of people when I attend all these public things, and I sat down to eat my pancakes, and a couple of seniors sat beside me, and their family. They had their daughter and son-in-law and their two grandchildren with them. And jokingly, he said, the grandfather said to me, he said, a lot of people stop and talk to you. You must know everybody. And I said, well, I'm the deputy mayor for the town. And he said, we're sitting beside the deputy mayor. And I said, yes. And he said, did you, saying to his daughter, he said, who works for Huntsman, said, do you know she's the deputy mayor? And she said, oh, yes, I know the deputy mayor. We met with her on several occasions. So then the grandfather says, well, I've got something to tell you about my grandson. And he says, his name is Forrest DeJordan. And I said I would mention his name on council tonight because I was going to be on TV. But his grandfather kept saying, what are you going to be when you grow up? Tell her what you're going to be when you grow up. And he said, well, he didn't say anything. He first said, the pancakes were great, and he didn't say anything. And finally the grandfather said, well, he wants to move to live in St. Andrews, grow up, and then he's going to become the mayor of the town of St. Andrews, and he's going to change the name of the town of St. Andrews to Forest Hills. So, Mayor, you better watch out because he's coming up in your back. He's coming on your back to take over the mayor. So I said, it's the first time I hadn't worked at the pancake supper. I actually got to sit down and enjoy it because I had to come to council tonight. And so it was nice to see all of the people out socializing, being friendly. But this couple from Ontario were impressed. They had come to visit because they had heard that we were a destination place to come and visit. And so they came, and of course, to see their grandchildren. But Forrest was really a very nice fellow to have pancake supper with, so it was great. And the second thing I want to mention is the drum making workshop, which was supposed to have happened last weekend and is not going to happen until July, because it's very difficult for an Indigenous person to go out of their community on an Indigenous Day. And although we tried to do it for June, we just couldn't do it because they celebrate in their own community, so I couldn't ask them to come here to help us with drum making. So we've tentatively set July 2nd, and hopefully we're trying to get all our ducks in a row, and I will come back with further details as to what's happening. I've had a couple of people come up and speak to me about one, they've made a drum and they need some repairs, and I said, well, I thought mine would need repair because I think mine was the only one that buckled in all of these drum making episodes, and that's because I was helping too many people and didn't pay enough attention to mine. But when I took it to an elder friend of mine, a drum making elder, and they said, no, leave it, it's got character. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to wait till July 2nd, but I will send out details and whatnot through Facebook on CHCO. I don't do Facebook, but CHCO-TV does it, and I know our town does it. And I thank you, the council, and you, Mr. Knopper especially, for helping me out with this, and Mr. Spear, who oftentimes doesn't like me to come into his office, but he does put up with me. So thank you very much for helping me get this organized, and I'm hoping to have be able to do some drums on July the 2nd. And I would like to see the 25 drums that are already out there on any Indigenous Day that we are doing any ceremony or event, that you bring your drum and drum along with us. I'm going to try and learn as well. Hopefully we'll have some lessons on drumming and singing. So we'll have to do that. That will be our next step. But I thank everybody for helping us out. I know I'm very fortunate because I have a lot of friends, and they come out of the woodwork to help out with the workshop, and it went fabulously. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you very
and
much,
Council.
Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harland.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow is National Pink Shirt Day. So Wednesday, February 22nd. This has been a day of recognition around the prevention of bullying and the promotion of kindness and inclusion. It was started in 2007, and it's become a national day of recognition. And it all started in Berwick, Nova Scotia. So I think it's just really important that everybody remember tomorrow is Pink Shirt Day. If you don't have a pink shirt, you could wear a pink sticker. And we'll continue to promote kindness and inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harland. Any other member of council? Okay. Thank you very much, council. Just myself, I just wanted to recognize two town employees, John McFarland and Bill Dowling. There was a fundraiser at the arena over this past weekend that had it extremely busy Sunday, Monday, and they worked extremely hard, and it was something that just came out the last few weeks. And for them to put in extra time at the arena, there was revenue associated with it. They are paid, but they did a fabulous job helping bring that event to life, which helped raise $11,500 for injured NB power lineman Scott Markowski, who was in our community. So thank you very much to Mr. McFarland and Mr. Dowling. At this time, we are going to have to go to closed session. I'll let the clerk, Mr. Knopper, could you please confirm under which section of the Local Governance Act that we'll be going to closed session?
Yes, Your Worship. So council will move into closed session at 8:08 p.m. as per the Local Governance Act 68(1)J, labor and employment matters, including the negotiation of collective agreements.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover for that to go to closed session? I've got Councillor Hurdle and seconded by Councillor Bennett. All in favor of going to closed session, please signify by saying aye. We are in closed session. We'll give a moment to shut everything down before we commence.